Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for this show. My guest today is Kate Favaro. Kate is with the Hospice of the St. Lawrence Valley. She is their outreach coordinator, and she's here today to talk to us about how hospice can help with the grieving process that we all go through when we lose a loved one. Kate, welcome back to North Country Matters. We're continuing our series with hospice, and today's topic is one that hospice has a great deal of experience with, don't you?
We do. So, in addition to providing hospice care to residents of St. Lawrence County since 1983, we have provided a community grief program since 1996.
So, hospice periodically runs a series of 6 workshops called Navigating Grief, which is usually set in one community at a time. The current session is in the Ogdensburg Library, but you've held sessions in Gouverneur and Potsdam recently as well. I think that title, Navigating Grief, is very illustrative of the process that we all go through when we lose a loved one. There is no one size that fits all. To the steps that you go through with grief, and family members may experience the same loss, but their grief process can be very different, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. Just because you're grieving the same person does not mean that your grief is going to look like your sister's grief, is going to look like your mother's grief. It all could be the same family. It's all going to manifest differently.
So let's talk about the kinds of grief that you explain in your workshops. Tell us about those because I think it will help people to understand just how personalized the grieving process is.
Absolutely. So we cover four main types of grief. The first is anticipatory grief, which is what we see a lot with our hospice families, right? So the anticipatory grief is knowing that someone's going to die and trying to walk the weird tightrope between imagining a world without that person while also not wanting to give up hope that they're going to get better. The anticipatory grief process can be a struggle to navigate, so it's helpful to have a sounding board to even make it through that. We also explore traditional grief. So that's the grief that comes after someone that we love has died and what that process looks like. Very different for every individual, very different from person to person, but also death to death. The next one that we cover is called cumulative grief. So this is when someone experiences a lot of losses in a short period of time. And those losses don't all have to be people. So it could be your family dog dies, and then a couple weeks later, your grandma dies, and a couple weeks after that, maybe one of your friends and you have a falling out. Those are all losses. That's all cumulative grief. And then the last one that we talk about pretty frequently is disenfranchised grief. So this is the grief where you feel judged by society, either over who you're grieving or why you're grieving or how you're grieving. So it could be that you're grieving the death of an ex-paramour and people don't really understand why that person is still worthy of grief, right? Or it could be that someone died by suicide and people are questioning why you're grieving if that was the manner of death. And then people also get disenfranchised for the way that they grieve. So some people are criers, some people are not. Many people have opinions on that.
Well, that's you can never get away from people's opinions, that's for sure. That seems to
Nope.
be a universal. One of the things I think about the anticipatory grief is that you you're kind of ahead of the actual death, but you're also immersed in the caregiving. So it's almost like a double burden, isn't it, in some ways?
Oh, absolutely. Trying to walk that tightrope while also caregiving and caregiving to the best of your ability. Absolutely difficult.
So, Kate, talk to us about the different styles of grief, because that will also help people to understand that the kind of grief that they're experiencing may not be the same as another family member or a friend who shares that same loss. And that can
Right.
be a little confusing, I bet.
It can be. So not everyone's grief is going to look the same. And I think people understand that. What I think people need more education on is the styles that people grieve in. So everything exists on a continuum. On one side of the grief style spectrum, if you will, are intuitive grievers. These are your grievers that you can kind of take one look at and you're just like, oh, you're going through it. Here's the tissues. Do you want to talk about it? And they do. They want to tell you all about the person that died. They want to tell you all the amazing stories. They want to listen to songs that remind them of the person, even if they're just crying the whole time, because that's what makes them feel better. On the other side of that spectrum are what we call instrumental grievers. Instrumental grievers don't really want to talk about it. They might have a select few people that they'll explore it with, but in general, that's not what makes them feel better. These instrumental grievers want to do something. So maybe they want to read books about people that they admired and pay attention to how they navigated grief in their own lives. Maybe they want to plant a garden and only plant purple flowers in memory of their grandma. Maybe they want to remodel a bathroom. You get a lot of remodeled bathrooms in St. Lawrence County after a spouse dies. I can tell you that. These are people that they process through doing, not necessarily through talking. So if your family member is one and you're the other style, that can be a little confusing at times.
You make me think about the remodeling the bathroom thing. That is something that we go through when we have a family member who has a serious illness sometimes, because you want to put in safety features and things like that. So, or sometimes it's like, oh, I wish we had done that before so and so got sick. So I can really identify with the bathroom remodelers for that reason. So, like almost every emotional journey that we're on, there are phases to the grief process. But again, not everybody goes through them at the same time or in the same order, and they don't spend as much time exactly the same time as others do. So, talk to us a little bit about those grief phases and what they look like and feel like, and why it's okay that they don't last for a textbook series of time.
Right. Yes. So we're talking phases of grief, not stages. The stages of grief research was really well done. It was done in the 70s, but it was actually done with people who were dying, not with people who were grieving. So we talk about phases nowadays because we know that people start in what's called the acute phase. So this is the first couple weeks to months after a loss is experienced. And this is when you don't know up from down, you don't know left from right. You either eat too much or not at all, you sleep too much or not at all. It's the really hard, emotional, taxing, confusing period really soon after the loss. When you're in that acute grief phase, it feels like it is going to last forever. It doesn't last forever. And we know that if we have any experience with grief, but when you're in it, it truly does feel like there's no end in sight. Um, Eventually you do shift out of that acute grief phase into what we call integrated grief. So integrated grief is really the lifelong experience of grief. And it's something that I think the majority of us live in every single day. We just don't know that it's an actual state that we're in. Integrated grief is still, the loss is there. You think about it probably every day, but it's not overwhelming, and your emotions aren't to the same degree that they were in the acute grief phase. They might pop up here and there, right? Like you might be having a really great day and then you realize, oh, today is my grandma's birthday. Today actually is my grandma's birthday. And I realized that we were doing this episode today and I felt like that was really meaningful. So you might have really good days and then something pops up and then maybe you're a little sadder that day. The acute grief emotions can come back, but they don't tend to last quite as long once you're in that integrated phase.
You mentioned about today being your grandmother's birthday, and that brought to mind there are so many calendar triggers like that when you lose somebody. And it can be the day they died, it could be their birthday, it could be other meaningful days in your life with this person. And so you really have to be aware that those things could prop up, and not be surprised when you have that feeling of loss all over again, right?
Yes, absolutely. You always have to keep an eye on the calendar. And if you're just having a bad day and you can't really put your finger on it, that's what I tell a lot of my clients. Just check the calendar. It might be the same day of the week that the person died on that's tripping you up sometimes.
I know in our case, we don't like the month of December because we've lost so many people we really care about in the month of December. And of course, that's always a bad month anyway because it's low light, there's more darkness, the weather often is not very nice. And so it's easy to feel depressed, especially when you start thinking about all the people you're still missing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
So, one of the hardest parts of grief is when you think maybe you should be over it or you should be feeling better, and it comes back to smack you right upside the head. Again, maybe one of those triggers has happened. I think that we don't really get over losses, but we can get through them. But it can be a rocky road to get through that initial period, can't it?
Absolutely. That acute grief period can be overwhelming. And like I said before, when you're in it, you do not feel like it's ever going to end. What does tend to happen is when people start to shift to that integrated phase, they experience what's called the dual process model. And this is the brain science behind the idea that grief comes in waves. So if you've ever heard that, and a lot of people do say that grief comes in waves, this is just the dual process model at work. So the dual process model is based on this concept of oscillation. So going from one side to the other, kind of like an oscillating fan. In one side in the grief world, you're in what's called loss oriented. So it's awful, it's hard, it hurts. It's all I can think about. I have to lay here and watch reruns of Price is Right for 3 hours because I can't do anything else. On the other hand, you're going to oscillate. You are at some point going to shift to what we call restoration oriented. So, restoration oriented is still, this is awful. It's hard. It hurts. I got to get up and do the dishes. I got to get up and let the dog out. I'm going to go to the kids' school concert this summer. Like, you're going to do the things. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that you're not grieving. It simply means that your brain is giving you a break. So, yes, grief comes in waves. That's kind of the science behind it. And it's okay if you kind of pop back over to that loss oriented. Like I said before, you can pop back over to that acute stage phase. But you tend to spend more time in restoration oriented the longer into the grief process you are.
And that's going to be comforting for people, especially if they're in that acute phase. And as you say, it feels like that's all you can think about. And so, but the dog needs to go out and the dishes need to get washed. And sooner or later, you kind of have to just pick up and say, well, I'm not ready to move on, but I do have things I have to do. And sometimes being busy can be really a gift, can it? As you say,
Absolutely.
it lets your brain shut off a little bit from that grief phase. So that's good. So I think one of the real blessings of grief is coming to the understanding that you can still feel emotionally connected to the person who has died, even though they are gone physically from your life. It's the richness of your memories and experiences that remain a powerful bond. Let's talk about that because that is really something that to celebrate, isn't it?
It is, yeah, for sure. So this staying connected is based on the continuing bonds theory. So this is the overarching idea that death ends a life, not a relationship. So you can stay connected to people even if they're no longer with us. And I think we all do that. We just maybe didn't know that A, it was quote unquote normal, or B, that there was a reason why we do this. So my favorite example of this is when before my grandma was sick on hospice, she had given me a necklace and I never took that necklace off. For the longest time, it was a habit. Like I would get up, I would put the necklace on, and then I would go about my day. After she passed, I realized that I was wearing that necklace constantly for probably a year and a half. And then it switched to what's called a ritual. So it was something that I would wear on days where I missed her a little bit more. It was something I would wear on days where I wanted to feel closer to her, or I had like an interview or something like that. And then also I would just wear it on days that looked good with the neckline of my shirt, right? So it became a ritual that had a lot more meaning. We do these rituals to continue bonds with people. I do not have her necklace on today, but I did drink a strawberry milkshake in her honor. So that's another way that people stay connected. She loved strawberry milkshakes. It was a whole thing. Um,
That's a great story, and I think a lot of us can relate to that kind of a thing. Uh, I know my dad's been gone for quite a number of years now, but he was somebody who always had a lot of very colorful sayings. And invariably, when something happens, one of my dad's sayings will pop into my head. And I say to my siblings and my kids, as long as we're thinking about Grandpa, he's still with us. His memory is with us. He's still teaching us a lesson. We're still able to draw some amusement maybe from something that happened by using one of his phrases. So I think that's important. And this part, when you do your 6-week griefs, I think you had mentioned to me that this part of the continuing bond is often a 2-week process because it takes people a long time to sort of get through all of what this really means during the grieving process.
Yes, absolutely. This one we do take 2 full weeks on. because people, they really have to understand the value in it. And sometimes people aren't innately good at it because they've never had any practice or they weren't aware that it was something that they could do. So we talk about continuing bonds through just talking to the people that are gone. The remembering the sayings is perfect. I love that. Food is a big one. Strawberry milkshakes. Grandma also made some really great sour cream apple pie. So making those things, staying connected that way. And then music. Music is big,
Hmm.
big for a lot of people. So we explore all those different ways people can stay connected. And it takes the full 2 weeks because we want to make sure as hospice staff that we're supporting people in finding a way that works for them. So we're going to give them the time that they need to really explore that topic and not just tell them how to do it.
And that I think is that's really taking people by the hand and say, give me an example from your life, and then they can really plug that into what you've been talking about because all of a sudden they see it through a different set of eyes, right?
Right, exactly.
So let's remind folks how to get in touch with hospice. As we start to close out the show, you don't have to wait for the next navigating grief session if you need to reach out right now for grieving help, do you?
Right. No, there's no need to wait. We do have that free community bereavement program.
Hmm.
And I see usually on average about 35 people a year through that. So that's a free program that we offer to residents of St. Lawrence County, whether they were supporting someone who died on hospice or not. They can just give me a call, 315-265-3105. And they can just ask for the community bereavement program. I do a quick 5-minute screening just to make sure that people fall within my scope. And then if they do, I can usually give them an appointment as soon as the next week, get them in. It is a short-term program, so usually it's only about 5 or 6 sessions, but it helps them get their feet underneath them. It gives them some foundational knowledge about grief and what to expect. And then we also go into continuing bonds, like we discussed, coping
Hmm.
strategies, things like that. And it gives them an objective third party to kind of spill everything onto because grief is messy and sometimes we don't want to put our families through that. So the community bereavement program is a really great resource that people should definitely not wait to access.
And it sounds to me like the perfect program for someone who's feeling that disenfranchisement that we had talked about earlier, where they're not really feeling like what they're going through, other people can understand, and there might be a little bit of guilt or discomfort. And so this sounds like, as you point out, that outside neutral person can really help, can't they?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. I hadn't actually drawn that conclusion yet. But yeah, disenfranchised grievers, I do see a lot of them.
Oh, there you go. So you're in the middle of the Ogdensburg Navigating Grief program right now. Do you have other Navigating Grief programs set up throughout the year, or do you kind of wait to get a community and a group of people who need it?
So I will do another one in the summer. Usually that one I do in Messina. And then there might be one in the fall. There's always one that runs the 3 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving and the 3 weeks leading up to Christmas, because we know that that's the most well attended one.
Yeah, that is the holidays are such a difficult time for people, and especially with all of the uh, expectation of happiness. And as you know, as I pointed out, for us, December is a sad month because of all the people we lost in December. So yeah, I can understand that the holidays are a perfect time for you to be doing what you're doing for folks. And let's take a minute, Kate, to just talk about hospice services in general because this is a great opportunity for you to talk about the overall programs, not just the grief support programs that hospice can offer.
Right. So hospice has provided quality, compassionate end of life care to residents of St. Lawrence County since 1983. Currently, we have about 50 people on hospice on any given day in St. Lawrence County, and those 50 patients and their families are getting that support from trained nurses who are visiting weekly, if not more often than that. They're getting support from home health aides for things like personal care. They get social work support, they get spiritual support if that's an area that they feel they would benefit from. And then they do get grief support after. That's different than the community bereavement program. But hospice support is not something you should wait to get. So you can make a phone call to hospice as soon as a doctor or a medical professional is saying that they think you have about 6 months left. And if you're not really sure or your doctor hasn't said that, but you think maybe hospice would be helpful, you can always just give us a call. We can walk you through it. We can explain how exactly we help. We can explain the criteria for getting someone on hospice. And there's no obligation. You can just call to learn. And then if it sounds like a good fit for you or your loved one, we can definitely move forward with an admission. We do admissions 7 days a week. So there's no need to wait, even if you just want more information. Nothing is going to lock you into getting someone signed on to hospice, but calling earlier means all of that help that much sooner. And that's really what you and your family deserve at end of life.
And you make a great point there about that because anybody who's in that situation with a family member who is in very serious medical condition, and unfortunately, we like to think that medicine is going to always have the magic pill, and it doesn't. So at some point, it is time to think about those end of life decisions. And so having a hospice to walk you through the process and to be supportive makes it so much easier for folks. And the work that you do in the community is so well appreciated. And the only problem is not enough people know about it yet. So that we've been trying to, remedy that with this series this year with North Country Matters. And we so appreciate the fact that you and your colleagues have been so willing to share your information with us. I hope it makes it a little easier for people to pick up that phone and make that first call, because there's no end of the relief that you will find once you have somebody who can walk you through this process, is there?
No, that is such a gift to give yourself and your family at end of life. Just letting us guide you is such a gift.
Right. Well, Kate, once again, thank you for coming in. Thank you for your words of wisdom. Thank you for running the grief support program, because everybody needs that support at some point in their life, unless you are a hermit living living far away from people. You are going to need to walk that walk. And
Hmm.
those of us who can rely on people like you and the hospice family to help us, we're most appreciative. So thank you.
You are very welcome.
All right. Well, these conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.